Nye dongga zai je rane je dongga le bangzi kanda zibe zanra ramare mundo dongga rage zive tozo jinla buje da ze yanla dojo yandenzo toda jado nyamo nyelo lege chakdo dozi Maria Manza Donga Nyogo Jenye Jazera Dina Dene Dajin Zajo Darsu Yonde Lozo Jaraze Dobu Chodra Jodan Janye Jande Dalu Manza Jambe Yana Dud Sedan Jejek Janla Bezek Dalu demo mambarabzen Kadan tenju cholon dobai Loja bobe nawaza dozu. Nous allons continuer ce qui a été commencé en octobre dernier. Et on va poursuivre donc ensemble l'étude de l'Abhidharmakosha.
In order to introduce our study of this text, last time Lama Jigmé Rinpoché mentioned the fact that what is contained in this text, and in fact he mentioned it again this morning, he mentioned the fact that what is contained in this text is in fact very important because it makes up the basis for what the Buddha taught. As you know, as you certainly know, the Buddha's teachings were gathered into 3 different collections, that of the Vinaya, which primarily covers conduct, the collection of the Sutras, which primarily covers the path necessary to go toward the result, and the collection of the Abhidharma, which makes up the Buddhist perspective or view that we consider when we are a Buddhist practitioner. So now we here will study what we are studying as part of this 3rd basket, the Abhidharma. We will study this in a very detailed way. This very detailed method of study will allow us to understand these foundational teachings. As many of you already know, in addition to the study program that has been offered for the last 30 years by Khenpo Chojak Rinpoche, notably in the form of Dhagpo's Summer University, there's also a new cycle of study that began at Dhagpo 10 years ago. And in the time since we began this new cycle of learning, each January has been dedicated to the study of foundational Buddhist texts. Foundational texts that are useful for us to develop as practitioners. In this context, this cycle of studies began in 2014. The Institute's students received the Precious Ornament of Liberation by Gampopa. This teaching was given by Khenpo Tenzin Wangpo, who received his diploma from the Institute of Buddhist Higher Studies, Shri Diwakar. This institute is in Kalimpong, India, and was founded in 2002 by the 14th Khunsik Shamar Rinpoche. We received Khenpo Tenzin Wangpo here at Dhagpo, and he transmitted the precious ornament of liberation. And then from 2015 to 2020, we received this treatise composed by Vasubandhu, the Abhidharmakosha. Each January, with Acharya Khelzang Puntso, another teacher who received his diploma from Kalimpong Shedra. Then, of course, there was the time period of the pandemic, which was a bit more complicated. During 2 years, it was not possible to receive a teacher from Kalimpong Shedra. And so during these 2 years, we nevertheless managed to devote the month of January to revisions, notably focused on the precious ornament of liberation. And then in 2023, last year, we began again with Acharya Khelzang Puntso to study the theme of Tsema, the study of the theory of valid knowledge. And this continued this year again, and in theory we will conclude that text next year. So now there we are. As you certainly know, each time that we received teachings like this, transmitted by teachers from Kalimpong Shedra, then throughout the year we have a study program where we review these teachings. We form study groups and carry out repetition. Basically, we repeat what we received. So we have been doing this with the Abhidharmakosha since we began receiving the teaching, and we continue to do so every Thursday morning. And this review allows us not to forget the teachings that we have received. They also allow us to go deeper with our understanding of these teachings. And doing this also helps to keep these teachings alive. We received them once. It took a certain amount of time, 6 years, but it didn't take us 6 full years to receive it, but if we count 1 month out of each year, 6 months in total to receive the Abhidharmakosha. And it's important to continue to study this text and keep our studies alive. So the study groups and presentations of this text, and furthermore even being here during the Chinrezi curriculum, allows us to continue our studies and keep our studies alive and share them. And just to conclude this short introduction, by taking part in these teachings, the teachers who come to transmit the teachings, and also the students as we are, and students such as yourselves, what we are doing when we take part in these studies is putting into action the activity of Dhagpo's Institute. And doing so according to the vision that the 16th Karmapa expressed in 1977 when he founded Dhagpo Kagyu. The goal of this vision was to allow us to bring together the essential conditions so that the Buddha's teaching could take root in Western countries, and so that this teaching could last for a long time. The idea is to learn the Buddha's teachings, to learn how to put it into action, and to keep it alive by sharing it. And if we look, this is indeed the activity of Dhagpo's Institute. And this process is not only present at Dhagpo here, but also at Dhagpo Kunjuling in Auvergne, at Dhagpo Mura in Germany, and at the Bodhipath Center, Renshin Ulm in Germany as well. And this process is also present in the urban Dhagpos, the KTTs connected to Dhagpo. This process is at work in all of these different places, connected with Karmapa's activity. And in the future, there's also something very worthy of rejoicing in. More and more people will be able to come and take part in this process of the Institute here at Dhagpo and stay here, spend time here due to the construction of new residences that are just coming to life behind the Institute. This will allow even more people to come and take part in this process, this dynamic, and commit to take part in Dharma study and practice. And so with that, we will we'll continue our studies of the Abhidharmakosha that we began last October. Hello. In the context that Sylvain just shared with us in terms of this continuity of the process that we find ourselves in, we'll continue with what we saw in October. Many of you were there, some are jumping in now. It's the beginning, so let's say, okay, let's refresh our memory of where we left off. And in terms of an introduction, what we decided to do in our study group is not to summarize what we saw previously, but to simply review the structure of the text, the outline. And why won't we engage in this exercise of summarizing? Just to share why we made this choice. Because when we summarize something, when we condense it, then naturally we emphasize certain parts and cut down other parts. And in fact, in order to make these choices, one must be extremely qualified. And in terms of the context that we find ourselves in, this doesn't seem to correspond with the processes that we're currently in, where we are students who are training in repeating the teachings, whereas simply coming back to the structure of the text, sharing the outline, potentially coming back to the root text, this is something that Jigmé Rinpoché shared is appropriate in terms of the context of memorizing a text and keeping it alive. Knowing the structure, the outline of the text is one of the means that allows us to retain it better. So here we will simply go over the structure. Nevertheless, for those who would like to review in greater detail without summarizing, I can say that I can remind you that there are audios of each session that are recorded. For those who are fully engaged in the Chinrezi curriculum, the audio recordings are available, are shared by email after each session. And if you are here as a new listener discovering, you can make a specific request to receive the audios. Okay, so without summarizing, let's go over the structure of what we covered last time. Let's begin by focusing on how Khelzang Puntso himself introduced the text, and this body of texts, the Abhidharma. He did so with a traditional method, which was the same method used by the Panditas of Nalanda, who relied on 5 preambles, which made up the introduction to a text. The first preamble was a presentation of the author of the text, Vasubandhu. Vasubandhu is the author of the Abhidharmakosha. Then, before going into the following preambles, 3, 4, 5, Khelzang Puntso took some time. He chose to take some time and give us a concise presentation of the Vaibhashika view. In other words, to present generally the established conclusions of the Vaibhashika school. This presentation had 3 parts: the basis, the path, and the fruit. Concerning the basis, these established conclusions, this can also be designated as what is to be known of the Vaibhashika view. And this is laid out over 10 points. We studied it over the course of several days last time. These 10 points, just to remind you of them. First, we saw a presentation of the 2 truths, relative and absolute truth. Relative and absolute truth. The second point that we saw is phenomena that are associated with or dissociated from factors for descent. Associated with or dissociated from factors for descent. The third point of the basis is the presentation of the aggregates, dhatus, and ayatanas. The fourth point is the presentation of the 5 domains of knowable phenomena. The fifth point is a presentation of the 3 times according to the Vaibhashika. The 3 times. So, 5 domains of knowable phenomena, the 3 times. The 6th point out of the 10, which presents sense objects. The 7th point, which allowed us to understand or to have an introduction on how consciousness encounters or meets its object. The 8th point is presentation of how knowledge is valid or not. The 9th point is a presentation of the 4 truths of the Noble Ones. And then last we saw the 10th, which is a presentation of dependent arising. And based on these 10 points, which of course we will come back to over the course of our studies, this allowed us to have an introduction, thanks to which we have some elements for understanding the Vaibhashika view, which will be developed in detail all throughout the Abhidharmakosha. That was the presentation of the established conclusions of the Vaibhashika school, or what is to be known. That's the basis. Then concerning the path, this was not developed much. Khelzang Puntso simply told us. He gave a very brief presentation because it's a point that will be developed in great detail in a later chapter of the text. So we didn't really get into this. And for the third aspect, once again, we have basis, path, and fruit. So concerning the fruit, a fruit or result, in other words, liberation. And here Khelzang Puntso gave a short presentation of the 3 types of fruit, which correspond to 3 types of arhats. The state of arhathood is the fruit, according to the Vaibhashika view. So this allows us to remember the structure of what we covered last time, which serves as our introduction. If you might remember, this long aside on the Vaibhashika view was after the first of the 5 preambles. The first preamble was concerning the author, Vasubandhu, and then after this long presentation of the Vaibhashika view, we came back to the second preamble, which presented the scriptural sources, which answers the question, which turning of the wheel does this treatise belong to? The third preamble is the presentation of the tradition that the treatise is inspired by. What transmission of the Buddha does this treatise refer to? So author, scriptural sources, tradition. And then the fourth preamble is a general presentation of the work, which is a presentation of the title of each of the 8 chapters and how they correspond with the 4 truths of the Noble Ones. Which ones, depending on which chapters. A presentation of the 8 chapters, a general presentation of the 8 chapters. That's the 4th preamble. And then the 5th and final preamble is a presentation of the purpose of the work, which answers the question, why did Vasubandhu compose this text, this treatise? Following this introduction, in the form of the 5 preambles, we began the study of the text itself. The text which was shared with you. We began a bit of that. First, we saw that previous to the first stanza, there is the identification of the title and the translation of the title, as well as what's known as the translator's reference. Then we looked at the first stanza, which corresponds with an offering of homage from Vasubandhu and a promise of composition. So we saw the first stanza, offering homage and promise of composition. Then we also saw the second stanza, which was an explanation of the meaning of the title of the treatise. This stanza answers the question, what is the Abhidharma? We can see that the Abhidharma is immaculate discernment, and it's following and I go read the root text, which I don't have on the same page. If you have the root text in front of you, then you can read the stanza, reading the root text again helps to remind us of what we saw. We also saw the third stanza that corresponds with the presentation of the purpose of this work. We started this stanza, but we didn't get to the end of it. And so here we thought that it was helpful or useful to start from the beginning of this stanza because it seems the most straightforward in terms of jumping back into the text. So this is where we'll pick up. And before that, a quick note concerning the outline of the text, which is not yet available in English, but will be soon. So you may have seen there are various documents that have been made available. The root text, which was composed by Vasubandhu, that is available in English currently on the red table. And there's also an outline, which will be available in English soon. This is the outline of the Abhidharmakosha, which was composed by the 9th Karmapa. After many discussions, we decided to share this outline with you. Why did we discuss it so much? Because over the course of the years of receiving Khelzang Puntso's explanations on the Abhidharmakosha, we realized relatively quickly that he was following a structure without necessarily stating the structure to us. And in fact, the structure that he was following matched up with the outline written by the 9th Karmapa. And then over the course of our years together, I think starting around the 6th chapter, he followed it specifically while even telling us the different points. And the translator, Dhagpo, also gave us the outline itself. So in the beginning of our studies of the Abhidharmakosha, we didn't have the outline. And then by the end, we did have it. And so coming back to the early explanations of the first chapters, what many of us did was, in fact, we inserted the outline titles into the explanations that Khelzang Puntso had given us, and we realized that it allowed us to understand the structure of the text much better. We found it very practical, in short, practical and useful. So we are sharing this outline with you. There are a lot of points. It might be a little alarming. It's just as a reference. We're not necessarily going to state every point of the outline as we go over it, but you can keep in mind that everything that we are sharing here follows this outline, and of course also follows the root text. And later on, when you want to come back to what has been shared here, you can use the outline to find your way through the structure of the text. Is it clear? And so we'll continue with the third stanza, which corresponds to the point of the outline, that is 233, presentation of the purpose. This corresponds with the third stanza of Vasubandhu's text, and we're still in a preliminary part. You'll see the first page of the outline is a preliminary part. we're not even in the first chapter yet. So for now, we're still in the preliminary part of the text. As Alexandra told us earlier, we'll begin with this stanza that we started looking at last time. The third stanza says, "Without perfect discernment of phenomena, it is not possible to completely pacify the afflictive obscurations. It is due to the afflictive obscurations that worldly beings wander in the ocean of becoming. This is why," they say, "the instructor stated this in order to liberate them from it." So, in order to explain this stanza, there will be kind of two parts. In fact, maybe more like three parts. So first, we'll explain the first two lines. In these first two lines, there's a presentation of the theme of the work, the purpose or necessity of this work, the ultimate purpose of the work, and the link between the 3 points, the 3 aspects that have just been stated. The link or absence of contradictions or opposition between the theme of the work, the purpose of the work, and the ultimate purpose of the work. These 4 points are contained in the first 2 lines of the stanza. So first we will look at the first point, the theme of the work. And just as a reminder, the first 2 lines read, "Without perfect discernment of phenomena, it is not possible to completely pacify the afflictive obscurations." The first point that we'll look at, that these 2 lines explain, is the theme of the work. The first point that is presented by these lines is the theme of the work. The theme of this work is phenomena, knowable phenomena, and more specifically, phenomena associated with and dissociated from factors for descent. We talked about this last time already. This is the theme of this work. And so we will talk about it a lot over the course of all of our study of the Abhidharmakosha. We'll talk about these phenomena associated with and dissociated from factors for descent. That's the theme of the work. Then the purpose of the text or the work. The purpose of this text is obtaining perfect discernment. And this connects with what we covered in the second stanza, if you remember, from October, if you reviewed it recently, or in any case you can go back and look at it again. This perfect discernment corresponds to what was explained in the second stanza as being the ultimate Abhidharma, immaculate discernment, or discernment dissociated from factors for descent. This purpose, the purpose of this text, is obtaining this perfect discernment dissociated from factors for descent. Why? Because we need this discernment. That's the purpose of the text. Then the third point is the ultimate purpose. The ultimate purpose of this work is to allow us to attain complete peace, extinction, or complete pacification of afflictive obscurations. and what follows says that without discernment dissociated from factors for descent, we cannot obtain liberation. And so, as Buddhist practitioners, what we wish to obtain is liberation. This is our ultimate need. And therefore, the ultimate purpose of this text is to allow us to obtain this liberation. So now we have looked at the first 3 points: the theme of the work, the purpose of the text, and the ultimate purpose of the text. Now we come to the 4th point, which covers the link between these aspects. The link, or what can also be called the absence of contradictions or the absence of opposition between these 3 points. This 4th point presents the fact that there is a link of cause and effect between the 3 aspects that we just covered. How does this link of cause and effect work? In order to obtain liberation, the ultimate purpose of this treatise, we need discernment dissociated from factors for descent. The relative purpose of the text, we can say. In order to obtain this discernment dissociated from factors for descent, we need to listen, reflect, and meditate on phenomena associated with and dissociated from factors for descent, which is the theme of this work. So there is really a link of cause and effect between the ultimate purpose, the purpose, and the theme. By listening, reflecting, and meditating on phenomena associated with and dissociated from factors for descent, the theme of this work, then we cultivate Abhidharma, that is Abhidharma in name only. This is also part of what was explained in the 2nd stanza. Abhidharma in name only corresponds with this great treatise of the Abhidharma, and also the 3 types of discernment arising from study, reflection, and meditation. By relying on studies or listening to the Abhidharma, listening, reflection, and meditation, we obtain immaculate discernment. And based on this immaculate discernment, then we can obtain liberation. And so there is this link of cause and effect established between the theme of the work, the purpose of the text, and the ultimate purpose. Are you okay? How's it going? This relationship of cause and effect shows that those who begin on the path need to apply or put into action the causes in order to actualize this immaculate wisdom. The first cause is the 7 treatises, and if we do not study them, then we cannot obtain the result. And as a reminder concerning what we looked at last time, in fact, the 7 treatises of the Abhidharma are all contained within the Abhidharmakosha. By studying the Abhidharmakosha, we are establishing the causes that will allow us to obtain discernment dissociated from factors for descent, which then in turn will allow us to obtain liberation. This concerns the explanation of the first 2 lines of the 3rd stanza. Then comes an explanation of the following 2 lines. The following 2 lines which read, "It is due to the afflictive obscurations that worldly beings wander in the ocean of becoming. This is why," they say, "the instructor stated this in order to liberate them from it." What's said here is that the Buddha gave these teachings because he knew that those who did not have immaculate discernment could not free themselves from samsara. And as they couldn't free themselves from samsara, they would continue to wander on and on through the cycle of existence. And so, out of compassion, so that beings could obtain this immaculate discernment, immaculate wisdom, he stated the 7 great treatises as basis for study, reflection, and meditation. That is the explanation concerning the last 2 lines of the stanza. And then you'll see that in the last line it says, "This is why they say, the instructor stated this in order to liberate them from it." And this term, "they say," in fact, it's the translation of what's called a maransik. Well, now we'll discuss what a maransik is. It is called it's a particle of disagreement. In fact, what that means is that the Vaibhashika accept that the Buddha taught the 7 great treatises of the Abhidharma. But the Sautrantika do not agree with the Vaibhashika concerning this point. Last time, in October, when we talked about the way that Vasubandhu wrote the Abhidharmakosha, we said that he presented the text to his master, Sanghabhadra, and that while Sanghabhadra was reading the text, he noticed these maransiks, these particles of disagreement in the text. And so these maransiks, in fact, it's a syllable that shows that what is written, what's said, is the Vaibhashika's point of view, but that not everyone agrees with them. Notably the Sautrantika. And then on this subject, in fact, there's a lot of discussion about who in fact composed the 7 great treatises. Did the Buddha state them, or were they written by disciples based on what they heard the Buddha say? So for the Vaibhashika, the 7 great treatises are the Buddha's words. However, the Sautrantika hold that 7 arhats, 7 disciples of the Buddha, composed these treatises based on the Buddha's ideas or teachings. For the Sautrantika, the 7 arhats composed 7 treatises concerning what the Buddha explained on or about the Abhidharma. So those are the explanations concerning the 3rd stanza, which presents the purpose of the text. Let's take a short meditative break. So stanza 3 was the presentation of the purpose. And then in this preliminary part of the text that precedes the first chapter, then the next 3 stanzas, 4, 5, 6, correspond to what can be called an explanation of the body of the treatise in and of itself. Concerning this introductory part, the body of the treatise will be explained. I think body of the treatise, it seems to mean the contents, the content. This is often the case. The explanations generally give a concise presentation and then a detailed explanation. So concerning the concise presentation, this brings us to the following stanza, the first line, which reads, phenomena associated with and dissociated from factors for descent. Wait a minute. I changed. Okay, wait a second. Oh yeah, no, it's fine in English. Phenomena associated with and dissociated from factors for descent, colon. As we have previously mentioned, phenomena associated with and dissociated from factors for descent are the primary theme of this text. That's the simplest thing to know. And then to give more detail, we'll go into each of these notions. The following line we can read, conditioned phenomena, with the exception of the truth of the path, are associated with factors for descent, because on the basis of them, factors for descent completely deploy. Here we go into a detailed explanation of each of these 2 points, and so here we see an explanation of the first of the 2, associated with factors for descent. The question that we can begin to ask ourselves, that the text will answer, is, what are phenomena associated with factors for descent? What are these phenomena? What is indicated here is that all phenomena associated with factors for descent are conditioned. You can tattoo it. All phenomena associated with factors for descent are conditioned. However, if we ask ourselves if all conditioned phenomena are associated with factors for descent, no, not all conditioned phenomena are associated with factors for descent, because there is one conditioned phenomenon that is not associated with factors for descent. This is the truth of the path. I said, you can tattoo this as kind of a joke, but really these are notions that we will come back to again and again. All phenomena associated with factors for descent are conditioned. However, not all conditioned phenomena are associated with factors for descent, because the truth of the path is conditioned, but it is not associated with factors for descent. So this is what Khelzang Puntso presented to us. And if we look at the correspondence with the stanza, this corresponds to line 2. And 3 conditioned phenomena, with the exception of the truth of the path, are associated with factors for descent. And then the end of the third line and the fourth line, because on the basis of them, factors for descent completely deploy. At this particular point in time, we didn't get more explanations on this particular point. However, 2 days previous, during this same retreat, there were lengthy explanations given. And similarly, last session in October, when we explained phenomena associated with and dissociated from factors for descent, there were a lot of explanations given then, but we did think that it was worthwhile to come back to the definitions, because this is the primary theme of this text. So we can ask ourselves, what is the definition of phenomena associated with factors for descent? These are phenomena based on which, by focus or similarity, factors for descent are susceptible to developing. Phenomena based on which, by focus or similarity, factors for descent refers to the afflictive obscurations. Afflictive obscurations are susceptible to developing. In order to explain by focus, by way of focus, we had this example of focusing on a beautiful object. Based on this focus, desire attachment, which is an afflictive obscuration, will arise. It is born and it leaves an imprint. This imprint grows again and again. This is why we say it is also accompanied by other mental events in its entourage, such as pleasant sensation. And these other mental events support this desire attachment. And so it is in this way that it is said that afflictive obscurations develop by similarity in terms of other phenomena that support it. So that allows us to have a somewhat more detailed explanation of associated with factors for descent. The second of the 2 points is a more detailed explanation of dissociated from factors for descent. There is a concise presentation and then a specific explanation. In the concise presentation, stanza 5, lines 1 through 3 says, phenomena dissociated from factors for descent are the truth of the path, as well as the 3 unconditioned phenomena. Space and the 2 cessations. We saw that for what is associated with factors for descent, all of these phenomena are conditioned. Here, now we ask ourselves, what about phenomena dissociated from factors for descent? Here, we find them among conditioned phenomena and among unconditioned phenomena. For conditioned phenomena, the only phenomenon that is dissociated from factors for descent, as we just saw, is the truth of the path. This is the only conditioned phenomenon that is dissociated from factors for descent. As for the rest, concerning the unconditioned, all unconditioned phenomena are dissociated from factors for descent. As the root text says, there are three: space and the two cessations. If we go into detail, this is footnotes. In terms of the vocabulary that is specific to the Abhidharma, essentially there's specific vocabulary that is used in this text, and for those who studied the Kheljuk, the entry to the state of a Pandita, we also share the translations that were used in the entry to the state of a Pandita so that we can draw connections between the various notions. Here, this term will be called cessation by way of examination or by means of examination. But in the entry to the state of a Pandita, this term was cessation arising from individual examination. So having these little footnotes allows you to link the different terms which refer to same phenomena but which are presented differently depending on the text. So there are 4 phenomena dissociated from factors for descent. The truth of the path, which is conditioned, and then the unconditioned phenomena, which includes 3: space and the 2 cessations. And then we'll zoom in on these unconditioned phenomena. The first of these is space. The stanza continues. Space, they say, is what does not obstruct. Space is what does not obstruct. Space is an unconditioned phenomenon that does not obstruct. We'll see that it is a knowable phenomenon according to the Vaibhashika view. It is a knowable phenomenon within the category of unconditioned phenomena. Khelzang Puntso invited us to think about what is an appropriate definition for space. If we only say space is what does not obstruct, it is not a completely correct definition, because there are other phenomena that can correspond to this definition. What does not obstruct could be, for example, mental events and consciousness. They don't obstruct. In order for the definition to really be correct, we have to add a piece of information, which is that space is an unconditioned phenomenon that does not obstruct. Therefore, this excludes conditioned phenomena that do not obstruct. Once again, space is an unconditioned phenomenon that does not obstruct. Concerning the acceptance of the existence of space by the Vaibhashika, there was a story shared, a story that Khelzang Puntso told us concerning space, to explain that the Vaibhashika accept the existence of space coming from a story where the Buddha said that wind rests on space. The story is there was an Arya, a noble being by the name of Tatul, and the noble Tatul had doubts and went to see the Buddha and asked, what does earth rest on? And the Buddha replied that earth rests upon water. And noble Tatul asked, what does water rest on? The Buddha replied, water rests upon wind. Noble Tatu asks, what does wind rest upon? The Buddha explained that wind rests upon space. And due to this statement, for the Vaibhashika, this means that we can attribute existence to this phenomenon. Because when the Buddha states that wind rests upon space, it means that space accomplishes a function. It has a functionality. Its function is to be the support for wind. So in the Vaibhashika view, due to this functionality, the existence of space is accepted. It is a knowable phenomenon. It is considered to be a knowable phenomenon that is capable of functionality. This is how it is defined according to the Vaibhashika view. And now we will cover the two cessations. We have 20 minutes left. I think we can probably get into the first cessation, but perhaps you have questions beforehand? Please wait for the microphone to ask your questions. And try to hold the microphone to your chin and speak slowly. So I'm coming back to the particle of disagreement. What I understood is that the Vaibhashika say that the 7 great treatises were stated by the Buddha, that the Sautrantika say that this was it was the 7 arhats who composed these treatises, and so I'm wondering, what about the author? What's his position on all of this? In one or the other, or not at all, somewhere different? Thank you for the question. It seems that Vasubandhu, well, these particles of disagreement, these Maransik, their purpose is to say the Vaibhashika think this, but the Sautrantika don't agree. But this doesn't necessarily mean that Vasubandhu completely adheres to what either the Vaibhashika or the Sautrantika say. He may have another point of view. Sometimes he agrees with the Sautrantika, but sometimes he has another point of view. What is sure is that when he says, when there is a Maransik, a particle of disagreement, this notably, specifically means the Vaibhashika think this, but the Sautrantika do not agree. When he talks about the instructor, he's talking about himself? No, the Buddha is the instructor. Sylvestre had explained the context in which this treatise was composed, and we saw that Vasubandhu had studied the Abhidharma in Kashmir with this master, Sanghabhadra, And after he converted to the Mahayana, in order to purify, he composed these treatises. And as the tradition would have it, he sent the treatises to his master. And in addition to what he wrote, he had included these particles of disagreement, and his master asked him to explain them, and based on this, he wrote an auto-commentary in which he explains the Vaibhashika view, the Sautrantika view, and also the view that he himself had developed as a Mahayana practitioner. So these particles are indicators that allow us to understand different points of view, but it doesn't necessarily indicate his point of view. His purpose is to offer access to the teachings on the Abhidharma, not necessarily give his opinion. Not opinion, but point of view. If I heard correctly, and please confirm this, space is capable of functionality. That is what is said? Yes. Okay. Okay, but if I understood during Sema retreat, everything that is capable of functionality is necessarily conditioned. Isn't it? I wasn't there during Sema retreat. Non, but c'est pas la même vue. Non, mais... I think it's important to consider this is within the Vaibhashika view. Sema refers to other views, often the Sautrantika view. And for the Vaibhashika, there are several phenomena that are considered to have a substance and a functionality that, according to the Sautrantika view, only exist in name. They don't have any functionality. And so here, as it was presented by Khelzang Puntso, this story refers to how the Vaibhashika argue the fact that space exists. But it corresponds to their view. For them, it has this functionality, this function of supporting wind, but that's really their view. And often, on these points concerning substance, the Vaibhashika view is quite particular. And just to come to it, it's useful to point out these moments when we've had other contradictory information. And, you know, there are links between Sema and the Abhidharmakosha, but, you know, here in the study of the Abhidharmakosha, it really is the Vaibhashika view. And the other thing to know is that you don't have to accept what's said. If there's other information that we understand better or that are more acceptable for us, there's no problem with that. But the important thing is to know the information relative to the Vaibhashika view, because, as Rinpoche said again, and even as So now we'll continue a bit with the text. So, concerning the study of phenomena dissociated from factors for descent, and more specifically, unconditioned phenomena, we covered space, which is presented in stanza 5, the 4th line. Now we'll continue onto cessation via means of examination, which is presented in stanza 6, lines 1 and 2. Vasubandhu's text says, all cessation by way of examination is a disjunction. Each one is different. So it's necessary to know, to begin, that there are two types of cessation. There is cessation by way of examination and cessation without examination. We'll begin with the first one, cessation by way of examination. Here, what is said in the 2 lines that we just read is that cessation by way of examination, which is at hand here, is disjunction, separation. It is disjunction, separation from all samsaric phenomena. In other words, all phenomena associated with factors for descent. In other words, causes, acts and afflictive obscurations, and fruits, which is the truth of suffering. This cessation by way of examination is disjunction from all phenomena associated with factors for descent, which are causes, acts and afflictive obscurations, and which are fruit, the truth of suffering. This cessation by way of examination is the cessation of all samsaric functioning. In general, what we call ultimate cessation is nirvana. This nirvana, this ultimate cessation, is disjunction, disconnection from all samsaric functioning. All of it. What can we understand by disjunction or disconnection? First, there is samsaric functioning, acts and afflictive obscurations, as well as all aggregates, conditioned phenomena that are subject to the truth of origin and the truth of suffering. Samsaric functioning, acts, afflictive obscurations, and all aggregates that are subject to the truth of origin and the truth of suffering. And all of these phenomena are afflicted. Then, on the basis of the practice of the path, we will progressively abandon all of these samsaric functionings. And by abandoning these samsaric ways of functioning, we will obtain cessation by way of examination. This cessation by way of examination is a permanent phenomenon, whereas all samsaric functioning is impermanent. Based on the path, then a disconnection, a disjunction with samsaric functioning will occur. And what is this cessation by way of examination? In essence, it is an absence of phenomena associated with factors for descent. It is a state free of contaminated phenomena. So what we just covered is the first line of stanza 6 and the first part of the second line. All cessation by way of examination is a disjunction. And then in the second part of the second line, it says, each one is different. And then the text says, each one is different, which explains that there is not a single cessation by way of examination, but there are several. This introduces a new idea. There are as many cessations by way of examination as there are afflictive obscurations. In other words, there are as many cessations by way of examination as there are things to abandon. Based on the practice of the path, we will abandon afflictive obscurations, and each time we abandon an afflictive obscuration, there will be a cessation by way of examination. And here, when Khelzang Puntso explained this cessation by way of examination, he introduced something. He introduced the 5 classes of things to abandon. There are 5 classes of things to abandon when we practice the Buddhist path. There are 4 classes of things to abandon by way of the path of seeing, and a 5th class of things to abandon by way of the path of meditation or familiarization. The 4 classes of things abandoned by the path of seeing are: the first is afflictive obscurations to be abandoned by the vision of the truth of suffering. Because we have the vision of this truth, we abandon a certain class of afflictive obscuration. These are afflictive obscurations that are connected with this truth of suffering. That's the first class of things to abandon. The second class of things to abandon is afflictive obscurations to be abandoned by the vision of the truth of the origin of suffering. Because we have this vision of the truth of the origin of suffering, we abandon a second class of things to be abandoned, a second class of afflictive obscurations. Then there's the third class of things to abandon, afflictive obscurations that are to be abandoned by the vision of the truth of cessation. Once again, same logic, because we have this vision of the truth of cessation, we abandon afflictive obscurations connected with the truth of cessation. The fourth class of things to abandon are afflictive obscurations that are to be abandoned by the vision of the truth of the path. These are the first 4 classes of things to abandon, which are relative to the path of seeing or the path of vision. Then there is the 5th class of things to abandon, which concerns all afflictive obscurations that are to be abandoned by the path of meditation or familiarization. So, to go back to the first 4 classes of things to be abandoned, each of the 4 visions of each of the 4 truths of the Noble Ones will allow us to obtain a cessation. We abandon something, we obtain a cessation. By seeing an aspect of the 4 truths of the Noble Ones, we eliminate a certain class of things to abandon in relation to this aspect. There are 5 classes of things to abandon, 4 for the path of vision or seeing, and 1 for the path of meditation or familiarization. These 5 classes of things to abandon are phenomena associated with factors for descent. Due to there being 5 classes of things to abandon, there are also 5 cessations, 5 disconnections. This is why we say there are as many cessations as there are things to abandon. If this is the first time that you're hearing about the 5 classes of things to abandon and the cessation by way of examination, just keep in mind that this is a succinct presentation, and this concept of 5 things to abandon will come back in great detail in the 5th chapter. Also, Khelzang Puntso, at the time when he presented this, he said, in general, it's not necessary to think about this too much. Just know there are different classes of phenomena associated with factors for descent, and so there are different classes of cessation. Quite simply. We can get into the details when we look at the 5th chapter. Okay, the timing is right. It's 4:30. Hope it went well for you.
Thank you.